You know who the family's also invited? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Where were they? Joe Biden was sitting at a beach. Kamala Harris was sitting at her mansion in Washington, D.C. She was 4 miles away. 10 minutes. She could have gone to the cemetery and honored the sacrifice of those young men and women.
Well, they did meet with them during the dignified transfer.
Because of
they were with them at the dignified transfer.
Senator Tom Cotton wipes the floor with Kristen Welker, who is the host of Meet the Press on NBC. The unfortunate part about this is you expect these individuals on these news channels to be unbiased, right? To just report the facts. However, I think they are allergic to doing things like that because when you have someone like a Senator Tom Cotton who has to continue to show up on these news channels and continue to set the record straight, at this point, he's probably 20-0 doing this. Watch.
I don't think it's something that's controversial at all.
Well, 2 months ago, you voted against a Senate bill that would have protected and expand IVF access, and it would have mandated that some coverage was covered by health insurance plans. If that bill came back to the floor, would you now support it? Is that what you're saying?
You mean Chuck Schumer's ridiculous messaging bill?
So no.
That requires fertility treatment for men who think they're women? That was slapped together in the summer in which he slapped together a bunch of other bills.
It's a bill that also would have protected and expanded IVF access.
Chuck Schumer has spent Chuck Schumer spent all summer long slapping together ridiculous bills that he thinks are going to help his liberal incumbent senators face off in their re-elections.
Just very quickly, do you know where this money would come from to cover IVF? Because in 2022, some $8 billion were paid by.
Well, no, again, that's why I say we'd have to evaluate any specific legislation.
So you wouldn't support taxpayer
dollars. I'd have to evaluate any specific legislation as I would on any legislation.
So you're still undecided on where you stand on this government-funded IVF plan?
Well, I certainly support couples having access to IVF, and it's not even a controversial issue in any of the 50 states.
Yeah. So listen. Kristen Welker, she's a robot just like Dana Bash and all these clowns, honestly. And it's unfortunate because somewhere in my heart, I like to believe these people don't really act this way in real life. But when the cameras are rolling, it seems that all common sense goes out the window. And what she's trying to do right now is push this idea that, and again, we did a video like this yesterday where the media has a meltdown because former President Trump announced that through government subsidies or through a government mandate, that couples would not have to pay for IVF. And of course, that is not a good look for the Democrats because they are the ones that should be taking the lead on this, and they're not. And so the media has to run cover for them. And the way that they're doing it is by bringing up the fact that some of these congressmen, they have voted against bills that had funding for IVF on it. Now, let's all use common sense here. Let's not be naive. And here's my point. They like to bring a piece of legislation to the floor that includes multiple topics or issues within the same bill. And that's why they never get passed. And that's one of the biggest criticisms on both sides I will always have about Congress is why don't you guys just focus on one issue bills? This bill is strictly for IVF. This bill is strictly for abortion. This bill is strictly for immigration. Stop lumping them together because every time you do, nothing gets passed. And that's the point that Senator Tom Cotton is making, is that that bill that she's trying to throw in the face of Senator Tom Cotton was not a bill that was based on IVF. It was a bill based on a multitude of things that the Democrats were just trying to run cover for.
Another one of the big headlines this week, Donald Trump's visit to Arlington National Cemetery. You've been talking about this. He attended a wreath-laying ceremony, obviously, for the 13 service members who were killed during the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. He was invited by those family members. Important to say that. He also had campaign staffers with him. Photos, videos were posted on a campaign site. Taking campaign photos and videos at grave sites is forbidden under federal law. You, of course, served at Arlington Cemetery in the Old Guard, so I know that this is a sacred place for you. Bottom line, though, I guess, Senator, is it ever appropriate to make campaign content at military grave sites?
He didn't take campaign photos there. These families, Gold Star families, whose children died because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's incompetence, invited him to the cemetery, and they asked him to take those photos because, as they told me yesterday when I spoke to Kelly Barnett and Darren Hoover, the parents of Taylor Hoover, who has Arkansas ties, they don't get to go to the beach on Labor Day. They don't get to have barbecues. This is their one chance to have a memory of their children, to commemorate their service and to honor their sacrifice. They wanted President Trump there. They wanted to take those photos. You know who the family's also invited? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Where were they? Joe Biden was sitting at a beach. Kamala Harris was sitting at her mansion in Washington, D.C. She was 4 miles away. 10 minutes. She could have gone to the cemetery and honored the sacrifice of those young men and women. But she hasn't. She never has spoken to them or taken a meeting with them.
Well, they did meet with them during the dignified transfer. They were with them at the dignified transfer.
Okay, let's stop right here because this is very interesting, right? She is pressing a congressman who not only served in the military, but also went overseas and also served at that cemetery, right? Because there are service members who actually report there and they have duties there. So they have obviously a soldier who protects the tomb of the unknown soldier, and there's other duties on that property. He was one of those soldiers that actually served there. So who is she to press him? Don't you think he knows more than she does? And that's the thing that I don't like about the media. I understand that they're supposed to be journalists, right? And they're supposed to ask questions and follow-up questions and probe. But I think they have blurred the lines between probing and debating. And I always get the impression now that these individuals, because they have Trump derangement syndrome, they would rather debate with people who know better than them than to just stick to what the facts are. And the facts are very clear. Is TikTok a campaign site? No, it's not. It's a social media site. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, even if we say that TikTok is a campaign site, okay, and let's say it was wrong for him to post a video on the TikTok site. Okay, but what's worse, him posting the video or the fact that Kamala Harris never actually showed up and met these families or greeted these families or even answered their phone calls? Which one's worse? Which one would actually stick with you till the end of your days?
Her and Joe Biden's incompetence, those 13 Americans were killed in Afghanistan.
Well, not everyone obviously was pleased with this visit. And again, just the law says memorial services and ceremonies at Army, national, military cemeteries will not include partisan political activities.
And it didn't, Chris. President Trump wasn't wearing a red...
It was posted on a campaign site, though.
He wasn't wearing a red MAGA hat.
I understand.
He didn't have a Trump
it was posted on the
just
Trump
like Joe
TikTok
Biden. Just like Joe Biden has posted content of himself in the cemetery or in other cemeteries or at a dignified transfer.
Yeah.
They're all American citizens. They have a right to go there and to honor the sacrifice of those 13 Americans who Joe Biden and Kamala Harris sent to their death.
Let me ask you about what we're hearing from another family. The family of Master Sergeant Andrew Marchesano. He was a Green Beret. His family was concerned that his grave was actually shown in a photo that was posted on social media. A statement from the Marchesanos' sister, Michelle, said, quote, "We hope that those visiting this sacred site understand that these were real people who sacrificed our freedom and that they are honored and respected accordingly." Did the Trump campaign fail to honor her wishes, their wishes?
No, Kristen, they honored the wishes of the 13 families whose children died at Abbey Gate. Those families wanted the photos. They told me yesterday that they specifically asked President Trump for the photos. Obviously, headstones at Arlington are close to each other. And when you take a photo of your loved one, when you take a photo of your loved one, then other headstones are going to be present as well. Frankly, I think it's pretty disappointing that the New York Times went and found a family whose headstone was featured in that photograph of another Gold Star family, and then went to them to try to embarrass the Gold Star families who wanted President Trump.
It's just disgusting how much they are so focused on what Trump did instead of being focused on these families and honoring them and telling their stories. You see, I could compromise and understand if they did like a huge documentary series leading up to August 26th, right? If they spent 3 days or 4 days telling the story of each of the 13 service members who died in Afghanistan, and it was leading up to August 26th, and they did that, and then after that passes, then they wanted to get into criticizing Trump, that would be one thing. But the news did not even do a series on these families and their stories. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden did not do a ceremony, did not even hold a press conference, didn't even do a video or an audio saying anything about this. Now, check this out. The irony is this. During her pushback towards Senator Tom Cotton, she ended up being wrong about what she was saying, and her own show had to fact check what she said. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so they say on our broadcast this morning, we incorrectly implied incorrectly implied. No, you incorrectly stated that both President Biden and Vice President Harris attended the dignified transfer of 13 American service members killed during the Afghanistan withdrawal. Biden was in attendance, but Harris was not. Now understand something. If you're the president of the United States, you would never be absent when that happens. This is when they're offloading the fallen soldiers off of the C-17, and you see the flag on the casket, and the president usually is standing there. So our thing is, even if she didn't attend that, that's not my beef. My beef is like, why would you act like she did? Oh, I know why. Because you're trying to cover for her, because you know that this is a huge stain on this administration, and you guys don't want to put focus on that. You'd rather put focus on Trump. So that's why they're doing what they're doing instead of just being honest about it. Now, one of the most controversial things that happened when that took place was this photo that you see here, where Joe Biden was caught looking at his watch. Now, why would the president of the United States look at his watch? I have no idea. Because he doesn't need to worry about time. He has handlers. He has people to tell him where he needs to be. So I thought the optics of that was very disrespectful. And, the news isn't going to report that. Like, they're never going to invite the Democrat on and say, hey, well, what do you think about the fact that Joe Biden was looking at his watch when the soldiers were being transferred? They're never going to ask that because they are despicable. So here are my final points. I get the impression that we continue to have to talk about this. I'd rather not. I don't want to keep talking about the news and their poor reporting when it comes to the Gold Star family members and these fallen troops. That isn't something that should be a topic of conversation. The only thing that should be a topic of conversation should be telling their stories, remembering them, honoring them. I would rather do that, right? But of course, the news isn't going to do that. And of course, Republicans, conservatives, Trump supporters, and Trump himself, we have to stand up and call out the truth, which is the motivation behind a video like this. Point number 2 is they have nothing left, okay? They've already failed in that interview with CNN Dana Bash. They've tried the whole DNC route. She never got a bump in the polls. In some respects, she's actually losing because Trump is known to underperform during the polling, and then when the election comes, he overperforms. And so they've tried every tool in the book, and it's not working. So at this point, the media is just grasping at anything they can to try to diminish Trump, even if that means disrespecting these military families. And point number 3, some of you guys are already subscribed to my channel. Some of you guys are not. Maybe you're watching this video for the first time. Maybe you've seen a lot of my videos. I did serve in the Army, and I did go to Afghanistan, and I was actually stationed at Bagram Air Base. And I've been to Kandahar Air Base, and I've been to Kabul, which is in the middle of Afghanistan. And so all I can tell you guys is this. I wish that the media and these politicians would just leave the veterans out of this whole political game. I understand that they have to have their talking points. I understand that they're trying to win an election. But what is not fair game is using veterans as a talking point, or using veterans to drive home this narrative that Trump is bad and all this other ridiculous things that they keep trying to come up with. I just wish that they would stop doing that. And hopefully more veterans will come out and speak on this, and you will speak on it, and you will remind people that this is unacceptable. So that's my mindset. I want to say thank you for checking out the video today. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comment section below. If you want to support the channel, you can go to the link in the description below, grab yourself a t-shirt. Stay grateful, stay focused, and stay true. Peace.